Mr Speaker, it's not often that I have the opportunity to agree with the honourable member who's just resumed his seat, but I do on this point, that New Zealand's debt is too high and that borrowing an extra $380 million a week is irresponsible when the opportunity is here to consistently reduce that with sound tax reform that is backed by the authorities of the world economic system, and that is a capital gains tax which will fill in the largest tax loophole that is dragging this economy further into debt. Mr Speaker, the honourable member, Dr Nick Smith, sounded like a Tea Party Republican in his refusal to state the obvious, that they cannot get their way out of the mess that they've got the country into without addressing sensible tax reform. He also got our price of carbon wrong, but I won't go into that. It's a story for another day. Mr Speaker, yesterday the Statistics Department reaffirmed that New Zealanders earned only on average another 1.9% in their wages in the year to June, except for the rich list who made 20% gain, probably none of it taxed because it was capital gains. Mr Speaker, yesterday the truth stared us in the face. What is the national government's solution to that inequality and the debt mountain? Here's what it is. Sell off New Zealand's precious public assets. Sell down our power companies. Raise GST on everything and give the richest few a whopping tax cut. Mr Speaker, attack workers' rights with the 90-day fire-at-will law and drive wage rates down. Bill English thinks that's a great idea. Well, thank goodness, sir, there is now a clear alternative, a strategy based on sound tax policy and a fiscal balance that gets to surplus the same year as the government's budget and pays net debt to zero actually faster than the current government does. Mr Speaker, the government is trying to brand Labour as tax and spend while we are projecting zero net debt faster than the current government's own books. That's why nobody is taking the national government seriously. My colleague has said the truth. As we previously did in 2007, 2008, sir, net debt zero under Labour. Net debt zero. The government hates it. It's now about 20%, but they can't get away from the truth. Net debt zero under Labour. Net debt will be zero again under Labour with the tax plan that we have unveiled. Mr Speaker, let me just restate some of the important features of Labour's proposed capital gains tax. It's a flat rate of 15%. It excludes the primary residence. Isn't it interesting, Mr Speaker? The Prime Minister says this will have the country screaming backwards. It's a dagger through the heart of capitalism. But on the other hand, he says we already have a capital gains tax. Bill English says the capital gains tax is the right thing to do. It's just not comprehensive enough. But 31 out of 34 OECD countries have one, and only Japan puts the family home in. Labour won't put the family home in. Bill English wants to put the family home in. What side of the argument is the government on, Mr Speaker? Mr Speaker, under Labour's design, it will be a flat 15%. It will only cover future gains. It will not be retrospective. It will not cover unrealised gains. It will be broad-based and fair to all, but it won't be intrusive and won't include personal property. It will not be an inheritance tax. It will not touch Canterbury's Sarah area for 5 years at least. And, sir, the Kiwi CGT will be carefully designed by an expert tax panel, like the tax panel the government set up and then ignored, which all but recommended the capital gains tax that the Labour opposition has had the courage and the foresight to stand up and say this country needs. Mr Speaker, this week it's interesting because there was another working group that the government set up and then ignored. That was the Savings Working Group. And isn't it interesting that the Prime Minister this week has moved, frightened by the reception of Labour's capital gains tax, to cover his backside on savings and say, we'll have to do a green paper. We'll have to do a green paper to try and resuscitate the Savings Working Group. Too late. New Zealanders know that National has no credibility on savings. They cut super, they cut KiwiSaver incentives, no credibility.
Tim Grosser.
Mr. Speaker.